across the globe. You see, I've already done the research, so you don't have to spend time online trying to find the best deal. That's up to 75% off. Just call me, the Hotel Whiz. It's a free call, and you get instant access to rates too low to publish with no cancellation fees.
Make a free call now and save up to 75% off your hotel rooms the next time you're going somewhere for business or pleasure. Call the Hotel Whiz now and get instant access to rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. Call the Hotel Whiz right now for rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714.
VTRN Sports is now heading to YouTube. Head to youtube.com/@VTRN Sports Lynchburg to watch both the morning warm-up with Trey Lyle and the Fast Lane with Ed Lane live each day. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and have notifications turned on. All the great local content you love with VTRN Sports is now on YouTube. Subscribe to the VTRN Sports YouTube channel at youtube.com/@VTRN Sports Lynchburg.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
Oh, we'll get to that in a little bit, but the theater of imagination is a powerful thing. And I don't know how much we're able to provide that here in the Fast Lane. You know, some of it can be cut through because you can just check us out at Fast Lane, Ed Lane, and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube. Or you can just listen to us live, 93.3 FM, VTRN Sports app, ask the smart speaker, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. But there is a powerful theater of the imagination as far as what's to come and the anticipation. Now, for Virginia Tech football, they hope the anticipation of the upcoming football season is not greater than the actual product that they get. Honestly, this is not a perfect hire. New offensive coordinator Philip Montgomery. It was going to be Christian Taylor from William & Mary, which I said last week in the Fast Lane, based upon the credible reports of that, Pete Thamel's as good as it gets when it comes to college football reporting. So I don't think anybody's off base by mentioning that Virginia Tech zoning in on that. But when you get Philip Montgomery, the upside makes more sense. And the gist of this is essentially a make or break year for Brent Pry and Blacksburg. I don't know if they'll directly get rid of him, but I think you have a really difficult time selling to your fan base to invest in the most important sport, the revenue generator that is football, if you disappoint once again. It's already challenging after this past year. And stop by, spoke with a cool dude. His name's Tyler at one of the businesses in the area. They want to advertise. I'll mention their name, but he's a Virginia Tech grad and a Virginia Tech fan. And he brought up the point that the biggest challenge is what happened last year, the amount of money that was invested into name, image, and likeness to retain a lot of key players. Virginia Tech did a good job with that. Clearly, they've done some with guys like Kyron Drones. They weren't able to keep left tackle Xavier Chaplin. God, I always get him confused with Christian Darrishaw, probably best lineman since then. Or Braylon Moore, the center. Chaplin, Auburn, make or break year for Hugh Freeze, much like Brent Pry, except they have more money. And Braylon Moore, you could argue he's going to LSU where they're in a make or break year. He and cornerback Mansour Delane going to Baton Rouge. I don't know if it's quite that dire for Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, given the amount of money they'd have to pay for him to go away, larger than Hugh Freeze to get rid of him at Auburn. But they're in that same spot. So if you're Virginia Tech, you're coming off a down year. You're in a spot where you need all the help that you can get. And all of this revolves around, first and foremost, what they're able to do with Kyron Drones. Because Brent Pry said they did not want a reset, but they clearly needed some kind of infusion of fresh ideas.
Yeah, I think first of all, there was a lot of candidates that were interested on both sides of the ball, but there had to be enough carryover to where it wasn't a wholesale reboot. But I wanted some change. Change is good. And there'll be some new things on each side of the ball. that our guys defensively are already excited about. And offensively, I think gives us a great chance to grow, and they'll be excited. Fresh ideas are good, especially when they're good ones.
Well, not just when they're good, but let's keep it real here. Fresh ideas are good when the last ideas never materialize the way that you would have wanted. Tyler Bowen may be a great offensive line coach at Ohio State, where he's got the support of Ryan Day, who's an offensive-minded head coach, kind of taking some of that back with Chip Kelly's departure to the NFL for the Raiders. But it took games for everything to materialize with Tyler Bowen. This past year was the more damning example because they returned all the key pieces. Good offensive line, all-American caliber running back in Bashal Tutin, NFL caliber wide receivers. Lane Felton got invites to the Senior Bowl. Obviously, Ollie Jennings, when healthy, has some skill sets as well. And then Kyron Drones. So you need fresh ideas, which are good, but you also need fresh ideas that can be different. And if you look at the resume, I thought Chris Coleman of TechSideline.com did a great job writing about this earlier today. And we'll speak with his colleague, David Cunningham, at 5:40 today in Covering the Commonwealth. But the point is, if you look at the resume in two chunks with what Virginia Tech now has at offensive coordinator, Philip Montgomery coming in, most recently at Auburn with Hugh Freeze. Veer and shoot kind of principles, spread the field, wider gaps to run the football, which Virginia Tech needs their run-first offense, and then vertical passing game, which it's harder to tell if the wide receivers and the pass catchers are going to be gifted in that area compared to last year when you had Daquan Felton and Jalen, the more athletic Lane.
But this system, as I kind of talked about this morning, more sets up schematic shots for the wide receivers to get open just based off of using space, i.e. notice how well Jalen Hyatt has not translated to the NFL, but won the Blitnikoff at Tennessee. So, and he did score, he had an absurd game against Alabama with Hendon Hooker. Like, you just need kind of a quarterback that can get there, and the receivers will get open in this system.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that the receivers can get open based upon the running game. And this is where Brent Pry speaking today, again, theoretically, this makes a lot of sense, that you wanted fresh ideas, but you didn't want to do a reset completely.
We didn't want to reset this whole thing. We've got a good foundation laid. There's obviously areas we need to improve, but I didn't want to lose what we'd gained. And I think Coach Montgomery, he appreciates that too. He identified it, watching our film study and those things. And I think, we didn't want to go two steps backwards, to get this thing rolling in the right direction and be successful in the fall.
Didn't want to go two steps backwards, but some of this is also the personnel that you have and where they're most skilled. And that starts with the quarterback position. Look, you've got to find a way to get more out of Kyron Drones. I get there's the injury that's there. But if you're Virginia Tech, let's call a spade a spade. He's your highest paid player. He's the guy that's coming back in part because with the injury, the market probably was never going to materialize the way that he wanted. And I'm sure he and his camp, his agency, whoever that is, did their own due diligence as far as figuring out what the market would be outside of Virginia Tech. Maybe it was slightly greater, but with no real offseason because he's coming off of an ankle injury and the surgery and missing a lot of spring ball, which is a curse in the sense that you want him out there with a new offense, but maybe it's a blessing because it's going to make it hard for him to go somewhere else. So he's clearly skilled. And Brent Pry mentioned one of the big things is if you get the right system in place, it starts with just having a plan for identifying where Kyron Drones is the greatest. And that goes back to what Trey and Ty discussed today on the morning warm-up. And Brent Pry elaborated on leveraging the strengths of the most important player on offense.
And then it's having the plan that makes sense, that caters to his strengths. And again, something that was talked about in the interview process. And, Kyron's not the only quarterback in that room, but certainly it starts with him. And, the familiarity, after watching film and identifying Kyron's strengths and weaknesses and areas he can grow and where coach can help him, that was part of the discussion.
It has to. It starts with identifying what you can get out of Kyron Drones and understanding understanding his skill set. I wanted to say trust the process, but I'm really trying not to use that because, it's not exactly the most endearing term.
Hey, maybe Cooper Flagg's a part of the process.
He would be a welcome addition in Philadelphia with where their basketball team is. He certainly would put more effort in than Joel Embiid, who got the sympathy MVP a couple of years ago, but clearly is not a valuable player.
20 and 34.
Yes, eventually. Better late than tardy, I guess. But for Brent Pry and Virginia Tech, it does revolve around Kyron Drones. And I don't think it's unheard of in this day and age to believe that when you're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, like Virginia Tech is with Philip Montgomery, prior head coaching experience at Tulsa. We won't get to that today in the fast lane. I'm sure that's one of the angles that Trey and Ty may discuss in the morning warm-up tomorrow. They'll have more on this. Trey
News actually broke during the show today, so I got to talk about it this morning.
You did. You gave your initial reactions, but obviously, like
I broke it down more schematically.
Yeah, it broke in your show. So, we have a benefit in the fast lane of getting into the weeds here for a moment. We get a benefit in the fast lane of having time to digest it throughout the course of the day. Trey reacted immediately, which is fun, but they'll have more thought-based reaction when he and Ty have a chance to marinate on that this evening. Ty will certainly do his homework once he gets done, hopefully inspiring the youth of America to do their own homework as well. But it's the plan for growing Kyron Drones, because Kyron, it felt like, and I think some of this could easily be attributed to Tyler Bowen, and not to just bag on the guy that left, but he did take a downgrade title-wise at Ohio State. Financially, maybe the same or better. Job security-wise, I don't blame him at all. Ohio State, clearly they'll probably have the same coaching staff next year unless Ryan Day goes off to the NFL. Versus Brent Pry and Virginia Tech, if this bottoms out, they're all probably gone. But growing Kyron Drones, it's the key to everybody getting what they want.
They're going to use the whole field, and the quarterback run game is part of it. I think we need to grow our passing game. I think Philip gives us a great opportunity to do that. He's had a lot of success throwing the football. He's had a lot of success developing quarterbacks. I think we all feel we get Kyron Drones to play his very best football and be closer to his potential. That bodes well for our offense and our football team.
If we get Kyron Drones to play his very best football, some of that's the implicit nature that you're discussing the hire with Kyron Drones. Kyron, and I don't think any college player is ever going to have a full say in who the offensive coordinator is. I think Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt was about as close because Pavia was going to follow Jerry Kill wherever Kill ended up going in all likelihood, because they were linked together with their success at New Mexico State. Liberty fans remember that. 2022, gift wrap 49 points because the team checked out on Hugh Freeze. But even 2023, Liberty played New Mexico State twice. Pavia had pretty good games and then a really good game in what was still a loss for the Aggies in the Conference USA Championship. That's the rarity, though, in this day and age. More often than not, you're not going to have the quarterback fully making the decision. But because they can transfer more easily than ever before, if the quarterback's not on board, he could easily leave. So you need to have him there. And that's why this other comment from Brent Pry makes all the sense in the world. That the hire of Philip Montgomery is the new offensive coordinator today. Not Christian Taylor, who would have come from William and Mary, but Montgomery, who once was a coach at Tulsa. Yes, he put up 52 in Frank Beamer's final game, that Independence Bowl about a decade ago. And then, of course, offensive coordinator stops at Houston and Baylor, good results. Tulsa kind of fell off a cliff over time. And then Auburn last year, not exactly good. But the whole deal is to try to showcase your trust in Kyron Drones, which goes back to the concept of selling drones on the move.
Number one, we need to trust Kyron more. We need to get to a point where he's confident in what he sees and what he can do. We need to throw the ball down the field more. And I think, it starts with him, with Kyron, being able to feel better about what he sees, what he can do with the football, the trust and the confidence there.
Indeed. A lot of it is instilling that. And does it not maybe say, Trey, that Kyron Drones may have lost a little bit of faith in Tyler Bowen? And Virginia Tech, if it was that bad, they would have gotten rid of Tyler Bowen before a couple of weeks ago when Bowen voluntarily left to go to the Ohio State University as the offensive line coach. But you can watch the film and realize, if nothing else, Kyron Drones did not progress the way you would have expected. Second year as the quarterback, first full offseason as the guaranteed starter at Virginia Tech, and with all the returning playmakers they had, not just at the wide receiver and running back positions, but also an offensive line.
Yeah, you probably could say most most importantly, they did upgrade at offensive coordinator, but the bigger upgrade they made, because this is now really a two position hire. It's offensive coordinator, and where they made probably the biggest gain, which is quarterbacks coach, and that's probably where they made the biggest gain, is getting a better quarterback coach for your quarterbacks. Because if you're going to keep Pop Watson, if you're going to keep Kyron Jones, you need them both to develop. And I just think that's kind of why this is I think a really positive hire. I think Philip Montgomery is someone, because I would argue I would throw out his time at Auburn, because I think it was more of Peyton Thorne than anything else, and I think Kyron Jones is better than Peyton Thorne. And Hugh Freeze Hugh Freeze still having probably a lot of control over the offense, whereas Philip Montgomery will have control over this offense. He produced good offenses at Tulsa. We know what he did at Baylor. We know what he did at Houston. This is going to be something which I think twofold. One, it could bring if this works properly. At worst, with your tough schedule, you're going to bring an exciting product to the field, because I think record-wise, I don't expect much, because this is a tough schedule. But if you can provide an exciting product that gets fans excited, then you're kind of keeping momentum going forward. And that includes, this is going to be, if they practice it in full, the fastest offense we've ever seen from a Virginia Tech team. Because Fuente ran sort of tempo. This is tempo. True. Watch Tennessee. Tennessee runs some of the fastest tempo in the country. And if they want to run this offense like you're supposed to, this is going to be some of the fastest tempo we've seen. Now, do I think they will do that? Possibly. I'm not exactly sure. But if this offense is working in full, it's very fast tempo. It's very, very explosive plays. It's a lot of points, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yes. There will be 3 games on the schedule. I'll point to the opener against South Carolina. Certainly Miami. I don't know how well coached they are, but the talent is at least there defensively. And then Louisville, also a very high talent team. Virginia Tech may mix in tempo with slower pace to try to keep those explosive teams off the field and lean on those defenses a little more. But the rest of the way, you bring up a great point about that could be another key component to Virginia Tech. But, this is what makes this hire so fascinating. This is a high boom or bust hire. The big moments of Philip Montgomery, particularly early in his career, were fantastic. Once he got ingrained at Tulsa, maybe there are more responsibilities the head coach. Maybe it's, what his offense requires and, the challenges of having the right talent in place at Tulsa. Over time, that became an issue. And, it kind of carried itself out over the back half of his career. But that's the part where you go, I don't know if I like what I see. But for Virginia Tech, I don't blame them. If you're talking about Brent Pry, see if you can strike gold and get the right offense in place, because you might as well swing for the fences. If it doesn't work, you're probably out of a job anyway. And that's what Virginia Tech at least gains by going with Philip Montgomery. It's a tough call to go with him over the William & Mary guy who has good mix-up and experience, but you've got a guy with head coaching experience. William & Mary's Christian Taylor doesn't have that. You also have a guy with experience at different stops along the way. Can learn from good things, but also things that didn't go right. That can be an asset to Virginia Tech. And urgency for this guy to prove himself. Sam Cephas would love that, but I think the urgency is greater for Philip Montgomery coming off the disappointing year with Peyton Thorne and Auburn. And Virginia Tech, we know about the urgency for them as well. When we return in the fast lane, there was some urgency at Daytona. It brought a win for the driver of the Liberty University car, although that was not on the hood yesterday down at Daytona. We'll get to that and maybe a bigger win for NASCAR. We won't go fully into that, but we'll explain when we return. Plus, recapping Liberty and Virginia on the hardwood this past weekend. All of that's still to come. The Fast Lane, back after this. VTRN Sports app and Ask That Smart Speaker. Open VTRN Sports.
Real soul food. You feel the warmth from the first bite to the last? That feeling comes to life at the Yard on 5th Street. Staples like fried catfish sandwich and platter, smoked wings, pulled pork, and Philly brisket sandwich, just like a cheesesteak, except with smoked briskets. Come feel the warmth in every bit of Lynchburg's best soul food. The Yard on 5th Street in downtown Lynchburg.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Cole, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
Well, Virginia Tech football also hiring an Alabama grad as their new personnel director. We'll explain that right now as we get to the rest of the topics to address in the Fast Five at 5-ish.
It's time for Fast Five at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
Reports are out that Virginia Tech, they are hiring a personnel director named Trey Nair. Not Trey Lyle, sorry to disappoint those out there that wanted Trey to get the big upgrade in pay. It'll have to wait till later on. But Trey Nair, Big 12 at West Virginia. Before that, Miami of Ohio for a brief stint. And yes, working as a personnel director at Nick Saban, learning how to tamper. Hey, we're not wrong. Remember Quinyon Mitchell when Nick Saban said in the draft last year, they tried to get Mitchell to enter the transfer portal from Toledo, and then he just never did, and that's why he stayed at Toledo and never made it to Alabama. The reality is for Virginia Tech, first of all, it's another tie with West Virginia. Matt Moore, the offensive line coach at West Virginia, who apparently he and Philip Montgomery, the new offensive coordinator, announced today with Virginia Tech, were both consulted as far as how they would work together with their hiring. Makes sense. Offensive line and what you want to do with your offense are big parts of it. But Alabama, Nick Saban, if nothing else, I don't know if it's quite on the Lombardi-Belichick model at North Carolina, but understanding how to properly assign values to positions and identify players that can fit, it makes sense for Virginia Tech. The challenge is the rosters are largely set right now. So it may be a good move for Nair to get his first full rung at this at Virginia Tech, but again, they largely have the rosters that are set right now. This may be for naught if all of his work is identifying players that will come to Virginia Tech, but if the coaching staff doesn't win, don't know how much you're actually going to get out of that. Meanwhile,
Number 4.
the Liberty Flames trailed at half on Thursday night against New Mexico State. They were in a dogfight on Saturday at UTEP, trailing in that one. But they fought their way back at one point down by 11, and they pick up an extremely hard-fought 7-point victory, 76-69. Look, say nothing else about this Liberty team. And look, there are ways where we can criticize them. We've been critical about their porous free throw shooting. 8 of 15 against UTEP the other night. Before that against New Mexico State, 3 of 14 in the first half. They were actually 13 of 16 in the second half. So there are times where they can be good, but it's inconsistent and you don't want to rely on it. We've mentioned before, they by and large have got now a good 3-player depth piece. None of them are big men, which Liberty's going to lack that. But Peter, he's a manufacturer guy off the bench. Xander Yates, Gabriel McKay, they all get at least 7 to 8 minutes a game. And they have their roles, and they know what they are. They continue to plug away and fight. And when you can start to get the open looks from 3-point range, the Flames did, particularly in the second half, 6 of 9 from downtown after going just 8 of 20 in the first half, Liberty found a way to claw back again from an 11-point deficit to ultimately pull out a 7-point victory. The grit of this team is undeniable, and the mental toughness is really shown throughout the year, but it's especially picked up lately, and now they get revenge on a team that beat them earlier this year. Good victory for the Flames that we will discuss with John Manson from AseaofRed.com around 5:50 today in Covering the Commonwealth. But we get to go into
Number
NASCAR this past weekend at Daytona. Hey, I'll give him credit. Even William Byron, when he spoke with Fox after the race, not once, but twice, admitted that he was the beneficiary of some good fortune late in the race.
Yeah, obviously some good fortune, but just trusted my instinct on the last lap there. I felt like they were getting squirrely on the bottom and just I was honestly going to go third lane regardless because I was probably 6 coming down the back. So just obviously fortunate that it worked out in our favor, but just really proud of this team. Worked super hard all week and had an amazing car. Just had a really hard time with the fuel savings and kind of staying towards the front. So crazy. Yeah. I mean, I can't honestly believe that, but we're here. So proud of it.
Honestly, can't believe it. He mentioned fortune twice, but trusting his instinct. I think it sums it up pretty well for the Liberty University grad who drives the oftentimes, but not that race last night, the Liberty University car. Let's call a spade a spade. This is a spot where you're not going to get much more lucky than William Byron. He was not a top 5 driver for most of the night, but trusting his instincts does pay off, and there is a skill to that, and it's worth at least admitting that. But this was a guy that was at best like a 10th place caliber car. But this isn't Derek Cope who won because like 25 to 30 guys crashed in front of him. But they're good 8 to 9 guys that could have won this race that crashed out ahead of him. Maybe not in just the final lap wreck, but others earlier in the race, like a Joey Logano, who could have had their chances and never really were there. William Byron did benefit from fortune as well. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah, he was in a position to get a good finish. I think if no one wrecked, he'd finish well in the top 10. It's as I said this morning, sometimes it's just better to be lucky than good. And that's not to discredit William Byron, being back-to-back Daytona 500 winner. But in this type of racing, especially what it is now, it's just better to be lucky than good.
It is. I mean, look, sometimes it is. So if I'm betting on a NASCAR race, normally it's $30. It's kind of it. I split it up amongst 3 drivers. I don't even think it's a bad split. Like I had Ty Gibbs. Who knows? Maybe he's there at the end. Because
Ty Gibbs? You had Ty Gibbs in a race? I'm shocked.
I know. Breaking news. I had Ty Dillon, who was like a top 10 driver.
By the way, you have not. Granted, I was sick last week, so you haven't visited the fact that you haven't mentioned to me the fact that I
blasphemed before drafting Ty Gibbs.
I drafted Ty Gibbs in the front stretch draft this year.
Blasphemed Ty Gibbs in the front stretch draft.
It's kind of like, those fantasy picks where it's like the player that keeps falling and you don't want to take him, but he's like too good. And he's like in the 6th round. And you're like, I don't want insert old wide receiver or insert like, who you're going to get solid production from, but there's the injury risk. And you're like, but it's like, it was Cooper Kupp for me this year. Like Cooper Kupp, I was like, Cooper Kupp's too good though. And of course he gets hurt during part of the season, but that's how I felt about the Ty Gibbs pick. And it was actually not because of Ty Gibbs. It was because of you. I didn't want to take the pick. But I had to throw my level wanting to win outlasted my level of dealing with you. So I want to win.
You're like the NFL GM. He's like, we were shocked he was there in the 4th round. Never mind. We passed him in rounds 1 through 3. We were so convinced that we didn't have an issue with him getting to the 4th round, but we had to take him. That's the logic that Trey apparently uses in fantasy sports drafts. Meanwhile, on to
number 2,
the other story. And we'll get into this later this week in the Fast Lane, Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the weather. But the most underrated story is actually the 9th place finish of Justin Allgaier. There's a bigger picture part to this, which is I think Dale Earnhardt Jr. is seeding the possibility of being a Cup owner in some capacity. Worst case scenario, I mean, he's got the resources. Maybe it's Hendrick Motorsports or Hendrick Gordon Earnhardt Motorsports, HIM Motorsports. Could easily see it, or HEG, I guess, Hendrick Earnhardt Gordon. I don't know a better acronym than that. But I wouldn't be shocked. Part of it is this. He had the right attitude as he spoke with FrontStretch.com's Dalton Hopkins. He'll join us around 5:55 today about the performance of Justin Allgaier, their driver in the Daytona 500, where he was there, kept his nose clean, and some luck at the end, of course, as we mentioned a moment ago, didn't just benefit William Byron, it also benefited the driver, the former driver, but now a driver of the former driver, that NASCAR would love to see do well because he's associated with Little E.
When we showed up with our first race to run in the most elite form of stock car racing, what kind of expectations can you have to be, in terms of being really competitive in the race? I would say that we'll be very happy with the top 10. We'll be really happy we got to duke it out with them all out there tonight. And, it was I guess if you told me I was going to finish 10th 2 months ago, I would have really been thrilled with that, or top 10. So happy with the result.
Dale Earnhardt Jr., after that performance by Justin Allgaier, he wasn't, again, like William Byron, wasn't a real winning driver for most of the night, but luck fell on him. Justin Allgaier was not a top 10 driver. Like, I'm not mad that my $10 ticket on Justin Allgaier at 65-1 didn't cash, because he was, realistically, like in the back half of the teens, kind of the 16 to 25 caliber driver. And yet he was there at the right moment, kept his nose clean in the equipment, and some fortune fell. But NASCAR would really benefit if that trend continues and it wakes up some people that may want to partner with Dale Earnhardt Jr. because, he's as big of an icon when it comes to NASCAR as it gets.
Number 1.
Meanwhile, Virginia against Virginia Tech. As much as anything, praise what the Virginia Cavaliers did, because they found enough rhythm offensively. A lot of guys, but particularly Isaac McNeely, who always had an answer, and Ron Sanchez wanted to see more out of the defense, but the effort was there combined with enough defensively.
Defense is the only way to do it. You got to get enough stops. Offensively, I think we had a rhythm today, and they made some good adjustments to make it harder for us as the game wore on. But I felt like with the last two minutes, if we could just be poised, not lose our wits about us, which we did a couple of times. But we just needed to get 1 or 2 more stops.
And they did. Virginia got the stops. They performed well, and we're starting to see the fruits of their labor. I don't think it'll translate to a win tonight. They've got Duke at home in a game they're probably going to lose. But there were positives there if you're a Virginia fan that you can feel good about that, again, against the teams they should be competitive against, they were, and they got a split against Virginia Tech. Both road teams win. It's college sports. Sometimes that stuff happens with 18 to 23-year-olds. But good for Virginia to go on the road and get a win, and they answered every time. Even though they had a double-digit lead, whenever Virginia Tech got close, they hit the big shots. They deserve credit for that. We'll discuss that twofold when we return in the Fast Lane. But before that, JMU with Shane Metlin of DNRonline.com to kick off Covering the Commonwealth next here in the Fast Lane.
Hey folks, Mark Dalton here with Terry Subaru. Old Man Winter is right around the corner, so I have one question. Do you have a reliable car that can take you wherever and whenever? If not, may I suggest you check out a new Subaru from Terry Subaru. With their all-wheel drive system, unmatched reliability, and industry-leading safety features, it's a clear choice when it comes to selecting your next vehicle. So come see us today at Terry Subaru, and you'll see why our customers all agree when we say you'll love our cars.
Hi, I'm Matt with Fleet Feet Roanoke. I've enjoyed working with Ed Lane and the Virginia Talk Radio Network. But when they sold their Roanoke station, I was skeptical the partnership could still provide value. Months later, I'm thankful that Ed took the time to meet with me, discuss the right solutions, and a plan to invite his audience to Fleet Feet Roanoke. Now we're able to build a connection with that audience thanks to Ed's creativity. Stop by and see us at Fleet Feet Roanoke to learn more. We'd love to get to know you.
Email info@virginiatalkradionetwork.com to start growing your business. Sandstone architecture, melodic music, wonders of the world. They're staples of Egyptian and Mediterranean culture. But you don't have to travel thousands of miles to experience it. Just drive to downtown Cairo. Located in the Grays Mill Center in Forest, downtown Cairo brings you food from the entire Mediterranean, blended with the best Egyptian recipes. This means fresh ingredients cooked on a charcoal grill, staples like $5 gyros, and build your own Mediterranean bowl. Experience the taste of Egyptian and Mediterranean world in your own backyard. Downtown Cairo, Grays Mill Shopping Center in Forest.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
An interesting stat, by the way, the JMU Dukes, they have played 9 teams that are currently in first place in their respective conferences. The most after that is Arkansas State at 5. And it begs the question, is that helping now that the Dukes have found a way to win close games like that 74-73 victory against Coastal this past weekend? Well, you know what we do. We'll use that to launch this segment.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the JMU Dukes.
The man who covers them for DNRonline.com, along with his colleague, Katie Harper. Shane Metlin with us here in the Fast Lane. He's at Shane_DNR Sports. Shane, You brought this up, as Preston Spradlin did when he spoke with the media earlier today, the JMU coach, that the Dukes have played 9 teams in the country currently in first place in their respective conferences. It didn't necessarily produce wins early, but how much has that borne itself out in terms of the Dukes being battle-tested, as we saw in that come-from-behind 1-point win at Coastal over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps. And I think, you didn't necessarily think it at the time, but, they went down to Florida week before Thanksgiving for a one of those MTE tournaments, and they play UC San Diego, which is winning the Big West right now, and the Big West right now, and they play Jacksonville State's winning Conference USA, and do that in the course of 3 days. Also played UIC down there, who's a solid team, not a great team, but that's kind of preparation for a conference tournament, like in the Sun Belt. I mean, it's Sun Belt's a very average conference, so if you played that many teams that are winning their leagues, it's got to be pretty good preparation for what you're going to see in conference play.
Shane, the other part to this as well is the on-court leadership. You've got a great article up about the backcourt trio. 3 guys with point guard capabilities. We know about Mark Freeman, but also Bryce Lindsey and Xavier Brown can all play that role. Oftentimes, they've all been on the court at the same time. Starting with the players themselves, how much goes into the fact that they seem to have done a good job of understanding how to have the right balance of assertiveness at times, but also letting somebody else pilot the offense too?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big key is, Mark Freeman is a guy who came to JMU, had played for Preston Spradlin before, was Conference Player of the Year in the Ohio Valley when they were both at Moorhead. So, I mean, you could have, it would have been understandable if maybe he'd have come in thinking like, well, I'm going to be the guy on this team. I know the system. I know the coach. I've done it. And, same thing for Xavier Brown, really thinking this could be his team when he's the guy who comes back from a starter from last year's really, really successful team. And then, Bryce Lindsey hadn't played a whole lot of college basketball, but was a big time recruit coming out of high school before he went to Texas A&M. So, all of those guys really kind of, had a right to think like, oh, I could be the main guy in this backcourt. They've all kind of, picked their moments. I mean, especially Freeman, who has just been scoring a ton here lately. Early in the season, he didn't force it. And, maybe he almost was unselfish to a fault. But there was a point where it kind of became like, well, if it's going to be late in the game, put the ball in my hands because, he's going to get to the free throw line. He's going to make free throws. He's going to make clutch shots, which he did at Coastal. And yeah, it really kind of has been a matter of those guys all, one, getting along pretty well, which, wasn't a guarantee when they didn't know each other going into the season. And 2, being able to accept that they each have a role and are each going to do some different things.
Shane, the last one for you, we've touched on the JMU Dukes and the success they've had on the men's basketball side of things, but the women, another victory against Old Dominion, another victory in general. I mean, at this point, are they clearly a team that not only is at the top of the Sun Belt, but one that it's hard, I get it, but maybe in that back half of the discussion of, they lost in the Sun Belt championship game, they might still be whispered in the conversation of teams deserving of an at-large bid?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be discussed. And, another thing, I mean, they have a 15-game winning streak going right now. Like you said, if they lose in the conference championship game, and we're talking about a team that won, more than 20 straight, late in the season, I think you got to put them in the conversation, especially, they've lost 4 games. 2 of those are to the number 1 and number 2 team in the country right now. Another one's to a top 15 NC State team. And the other one was, a top 100-ish Northern Arizona. So not a terrible loss. It's not like they've lost anybody bad. They don't necessarily have a huge signature win on their resume, but I think, if they do happen to slip up, they got to be at least in the conversation, and it's going to be tough. You look at, how tough it is for mid-majors to get in that large, but I would think they have to at least, be in the mix to some degree.
Shane, yes, they will. In the mix, they're undefeated in Sun Belt play. They only have 4 losses overall. The JMU Lady Dukes, even more stellar than the men, who are at the tied for the top. The men are at the Sun Belt Conference. The Lady Dukes, clearly they're on their own and in a class of their own as well. Shane, your insight is in a class of its own, and it's easily available at dnronline.com. Shane, good to chat with you once again.
All right, thanks.
Now to the Virginia Tech Hokies.
With David Cunningham, the real D Cunna, Twitter and Instagram, techsideline.com, and with us here in the Fast Lane. David, first of all, we'll get to the men and women's basketball before really getting into the meat of it, which is football. Women's basketball, how much did Thursday's loss against North Carolina hurt their tournament chances, particularly the fact that it was a game that was in reach, but they ended up losing it and missing a chance to get a really good road victory against now a top 10 UNC Lady Tar Heels team?
You know, and I don't think it really hurt them too much. I think the potential is really what hurt them. They had the opportunity there, but it's funny you mentioned that. In the latest ESPN bracketology, Charlie Cream has actually moved the Hokies up 1 spot. They used to be the last team in the tournament. Now they're the second to last team in the tournament. So they're sitting in a good spot. Here's the thing. They've got 2 home games this week. They've got Stanford and Cal on Thursday and Sunday, respectively, assuming the weather allows. And then they've got next week at Boston College, at Clemson. They've got 4 winnable games. Cal is the toughest one on senior day left. They played North Carolina tough. They showed that, hey, they can compete with some really, really good teams on the road. We've seen them beat Georgia Tech and Louisville this year. They haven't been close in some games against maybe the biggest teams, the NC States and the Notre Dames and the Dukes and the Florida States. But they played UNC tough. I thought they played really well, well enough to win 4 stretches. They did not score, or they only scored 3 field goals in the entire 4th quarter. That doesn't win you games, but steps in the right direction. And if they can take care of business over these next 4 games, they win 3 of them at least, I think. They have a good shot to be in that NCAA tournament field. What can't happen is when they go to Greensboro for the ACC tournament, they slip up in that first round. You probably have to win a game in Greensboro just to feel a little bit comfortable, assuming you finish out the regular season strong. But hey, they're in a good spot. I don't think Thursday's result really hurt them too much. It was more, man, if they had won, it would have been a really, really, really big positive.
David, now on to the men's side of things. We'll hold basketball for another time. Football, Philip Montgomery, offensive coordinator. A lot of people thought it might have been Taylor from William and Mary, but Philip Montgomery ends up getting the nod. I thought your colleague Chris Coleman wrote about this really well at techsideline.com. Is this the ultimate boomer bust, but a worthwhile hire, given that maybe this year is a boomer bust type of year where you might as well swing for the fences?
I think the biggest thing is that he has familiarity with Kyron Drones. That is the most important thing. In Brent Pry's press conference earlier today, which Andy Bitter was covering for us, Brent Pry mentioned that this is a guy who was familiar with Kyron Drones and recruited him out of high school. I think you've got a guy who has been around, has seen a lot. He's former head coach, former offensive coordinator. He's coordinated a lot of different places. He's been a quarterback's coach at a lot of different places. He's very experienced. How does his stuff translate to what Virginia Tech wants to do? I'm not quite sure. I think we'll find out more about that in the spring. I think it is a little bit boomer bust. I don't know if I'd use that terminology, though. I feel like it's more like who knows which way it's going to go. And I feel like that's most stuff in this day and age, in the transfer portal and the coaching carousel era of it all. It's just hard to kind of get a grasp of how something's going to work. How is he going to tailor what he wants to do to Virginia Tech's players, to the quarterback who he is familiar with? Because when he was the head coach at Tulsa, he recruited Kyron Drones there, offered him a scholarship. So I think this is it's a good hire on paper for the Hokies. I think with what he wants to do with his experience, it's a good hire. Could they have gotten somebody better? I'm not sure. I think this is one of those, like Sam Seifkes, the defensive coordinator, where you got to let it play out a little bit first. You got to see a little bit, especially in spring practice, of what he's going to bring to the table and what it might look like. But I think he's got a lot of strong qualities. How he kind of fits Virginia Tech has yet to be seen. I don't know if I'd describe it as boomer bust. I think the way Chris painted it, though, is, that it's going to be really interesting that Virginia Tech's offense and defense are going to be starting completely fresh this year. Spring ball is going to be huge for the Hokies. 2 new coordinators. Nobody knows what to expect. South Carolina is not going to know what to expect come August 31st. So that element of surprise a little bit is going to be quite interesting.
It is. We will be monitoring that. It's going to be a fun off-season development for Virginia Tech and the overall challenges. The last one on this, which angle piques your interest more out of these, David? Is it the fact that, when asked about consulting with Art Briles, Brent Pry very deftly mentioned that no, he did not consult with Art Briles. I don't know whether that's just, you can't say that you did because of the name Art Briles, or is it the fact that he made multiple intimations that, it seemed like Kyron Drones was part of this decision as well, in terms of a guy that Drones would be comfortable being coached by.
I think the interesting part about that second thing, I wouldn't look too much into the Art Briles thing, especially because it's been a while since those guys worked together. He was there with Briles, Baylor and Houston, but that was over a decade ago. I think the Drones piece of it is interesting because Kyron Drones is the cog that makes this machine work. The Hokies need him, and they need him healthy, and they need him to play well. They need him to play at his best. And I think he has an opportunity, and I think it is important. If I'm Brent Pry, I don't know if I'd go say, Kyron, do you want me to hire this guy? But I might go and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this guy? What was your experience like when you were being recruited by him out of high school, right? What is that experience like? What was that relationship like? Did you trust the guy? How would you feel about this? I wouldn't do or die by it, and that's an interesting tightrope you might be walking. But at the same time, I think it does give you a good perspective of how your quarterback would feel about it. And I don't know that at the end of the day, if you're a head coach, you're getting paid a lot of money to make hard, tough decisions. And that's a decision that Brent Pry has to make, whether or not his quarterback likes it at the end of the day. But if your quarterback likes it, you get his opinion that, hey, this could work pretty well, I think it gives you all the more reason to go for it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I mean, if you're Virginia Tech, give it a shot, because if it doesn't work out, you might be retooling the entire coaching staff and roster anyway with an entirely new regime. Nobody that needs retooling is David Cunningham, or somebody who does not need retooling is David Cunningham. He's got the skills, and they're on display at techsideline.com. David, great to be chatting with you as always. We appreciate it, and we'll chat again soon.
Sounds good, Ed. Talk to you soon.
Now to the Liberty Flames.
John Manson from aseaofred.com. John, I wouldn't say it's totally rinse, wash, repeat, but it certainly felt that way watching it. And, of course, your articles at aseaofred.com. Peter and Aquino push Liberty past New Mexico State in second half. Then, 2 nights later, Saturday night against UTEP, second half spurt pushes Liberty past UTEP this time. Now the Flames, 21-5 overall, second place at 9-4 in Conference USA. What does this say about the coaching staff and how underrated they are and knowing how to make adjustments when given the time at the half and even over the course of the second half of these games?
Yeah, Ed, it's funny. The first 24-odd games, I think it is, Liberty hadn't trailed all season at halftime, and that's something that I was kind of tracking, and I think Liberty might have been the to have that stat backing them up going into this road trip this past week. But obviously those 2 games, they ended up trailing at half in both of them. And really the New Mexico State game, it was about a 10-minute spell there late in the first half. They just went cold, and the defense was still solid, kept them in the game, but ended up going from leading by as many as 11 in the first half to trailing at the halftime. But then they came out in the second half and played really well. And then it was kind of a similar type thing in the game Saturday night against UTEP. Except the Miners, they're a team that's, if they would have won that game, they would have been in second place in Conference USA. So they're a team that's kind of had Liberty's number the past few times out, had a 3-game winning streak against Liberty entering Saturday night. And, Coach McKay and his staff obviously did a great job to, put the right game plan together to put the Flames over the top in that one. And again, it was Taylor Peter off the bench. And Aquino is another guy we've talked a lot about him throughout the season, but he's really stepped it up, or at least he stepped it up in these 2 games on the road trip offensively and was more aggressive. A lot of times he's looking kind of like a Zach Cleveland. He's looking to pass first, second, and third rather than looking for his own shot. But looked like he got a little bit more aggressive, especially there in the second half against UTEP and going after his own shots. And, did the same thing against New Mexico State and really kind of spurred Liberty to their comebacks there in the second half. And that's something Liberty's going to need more of from Owen as we get, into the stretch run and into the conference tournament down in Huntsville.
J.C. Manson and A Sea of Red. Those are the Twitter handles to keep up with John and the team at aseaofred.com as John Manson is with us here in the Fast Lane. You referenced the things that the Flames are going to need. Free throw shooting. We mentioned it's been hit or miss. They were 8 of 15 against UTEP on Saturday. They had an abysmal first half, but a great second half in that surge against New Mexico State. Is it that they're not capable of it, or is it that, we saw, I think the second half against New Mexico State proved they can be clutch at the line when necessary, but the consistency is the part that seems to leave Flames fans wanting a little bit more.
Yeah, it's really odd, the free throw shooting. It's for a team that's, one of the tops in the country and certainly in Conference USA and in shooting, 3-pointers and then also, just effective field goal. And then they got so many shooters and so many scorers on the team that it's sometimes a little bit of a surprise that they struggle so much from the free throw line. And it's primarily due to the main guys that get to the line the most, which is, a Zach Cleveland, Owen Aquino, and even a Javon Moffmer, who's kind of struggled, from the free throw line this year, despite being around an 80% free throw shooter from his 3 years at Cedarville. But yeah, Coach McKay kind of talked about it, at post game, one of these 2 games this week, about how, sometimes, I think it was the New Mexico State game he was talking about it, sometimes, just get in your head. And it was Zach Cleveland went 1 for 8 there in the first half against New Mexico State, even airballed one. And it, he's got, even though he's struggling to even hit 60% from the line on the season, he, was, 1 for 8 is certainly not what he's going to be doing most nights. So his ability to knock those down in clutch times, crucial situations there in the second half was definitely crucial and something Liberty would have to continue to do, like I said, down the stretch run.
John Manson with us here in the Fast Lane. He's at JC Manson and A Sea of Red on Twitter. John, we'll wrap it up on this. Spring practice is underway. I know it's not technically spring, but just ride with us on this right now as well. The interesting note that came out for me is Juju Gray. Is this manufacturing somebody out of the backfield with explosive playmaking, given that, he was listed as a wide receiver, played that, but as a running team, maybe that's the best way to get him the ball a little bit more often?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like it's spring, does it? With the cold weather and the snow forecast once again this week. But yeah, I think, if you go back to a year ago, Liberty was looking for someone to kind of take the place of Aaron Bedgood in that role where he was, the slot receiver, but really more of a running back. And, with his eligibility expiring, that they were looking for someone new to step in. And we thought it might be a Juju Gray. But he ended up being, kind of injured off and on throughout the year. And when he was in there, he was more in that slot receiver position. But, Coach Chadwell says that now they're going to put him, he's full-time working with the running backs. And if he's able to stick there and stay healthy, this is a guy you're talking about who was an all-conference kick returner in the ACC at NC State. And we saw some of his explosive ability, not just in the return game, but also out of the slot, catching passes, and then also as a runner during the season when he was healthy in 2024 for the Flames. So if he's a guy that can have even half the production that an Aaron Bedgood had for Liberty back in that 2023 Fiesta Bowl Conference USA Championship team, then that certainly will bode well for the Flames' offensive success in 2025.
John, good chatting with you. Thank you for the little nugget on football and, of course, basketball. Both of these are congruently developing, and we'll keep you posted. You will keep us posted at aseaofred.com on both of those.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Ed.
Now to NASCAR.
The captain himself, Dalton Hopkins of FrontStretch.com. Dalton, William Byron, I thought he summed it up well. He mentioned the word fortunate a couple of times in recapping his victory, but also mentioned there was a little bit of skill involved to Val and navigate that wreck. Is that an apt and accurate description of a guy that is good enough that he won the Daytona 500 last year, so he's a back-to-back winner, but also, let's be real, he was more of a fringe top 10 driver who benefited from some carnage in front of him late in the race?
You know, I was talking to my coworker Michael Massey last night about this, and we both kind of agreed that William Byron is not really a typical super speedway racer. He's not really known for something like that. So to see him succeed back to back, is it time to start maybe considering that maybe he actually is a decent one? I'm not really sure because, well, look at the last 2 years. I mean, so you had last year where he won and he was in the lead. Yes, he was running pretty well, but then again, half the field was taken out. Then he was here last night, and he was there in the end. That's because half the field was taken out. Actually, most of the field was taken out last night, especially right in front of him at the last lap. So I don't know if William Byron can be considered good, but perhaps a good at super speedway racing, but perhaps you can consider him good at survived super speedway racing because he was there in the end. And really at the end of the day, if you ask any driver in the field, they'll all pretty much agree you have to survive to the end of the race. And I think that's kind of where we are when it comes to the Daytona 500, other super speedway races. And before, I send it back to you, like, remember, there's a famous quote from Richard Petty, and I heard it multiple times, all over and over again last night. Richard Petty, the one and only, once said, "I would rather be lucky than good." And William Byron is definitely lucky, but also he's pretty good too. Maybe a little bit of both.
It is. I mean, and let's keep it real here. William Byron got some luck yesterday, but he's also a driver that has double-digit wins in his NASCAR career. This is not Derek Cope because 25 people wrecked in front of him and he won the 1992 or whatever it was Daytona 500. Like, he got some fortune there, but he still is good enough that he's won on all sorts of disciplines of a track. Meanwhile, is the bigger story for NASCAR. I know a ninth place finish doesn't get a ton of people excited, but the reaction of Dale Earnhardt Jr. afterwards, and you've got it documented at the Front Stretch YouTube page and at Pit Lane CPT on Twitter. But is there something to be said about the fact that Dale Earnhardt Jr. did not come out right and say, yes, we're going to run Cup full time, but clearly it seemed like this was a trial balloon that went over much better than a lead balloon?
Maybe this wasn't meant to be a trial balloon at first, but if you listen to him and you hear what he was saying and you talk to him and you saw the emotions on his face and really the overall attitude of Junior Motorsports, the whole number 40 team last night after getting that first top 10 in their debut, you would probably agree that team was reinvigorated. And Dale Jr. himself said, this is kind of, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. And obviously he's been saying that for years, right? He's been saying that he wants to be in the Cup level, and he himself even admitted that. But he also mentioned that last night, this whole experience has really reinvigorated that drive to maybe compete in the Cup level. And I'm not saying that we'll see 4 Junior Motorsports teams next year competing full-time in the Cup Series, but maybe there's a chance, we'll see a car be entered later on this year. Maybe we'll see it be entered multiple times this year, and maybe we'll see him maybe try for a full-time Cup Series team next year. I mean, this is where they want to be. They want to be the pinnacle of NASCAR racing. So while, you said, everyone is maybe ninth place isn't exactly that exciting. It certainly was to Dale Jr. It certainly was to Kelly Earnhardt. I mean, Justin Allgaier and Kelly Earnhardt even said on Thursday night after they made the Daytona 500, they even said, we've already won. And they won even more last night.
Well, it's a win every time we get your insight, Dalton. Thank you for sharing it with us today in the Fast Lane and recapping the start of the NASCAR season with the Daytona 500 and the Liberty University driver, William Byron, getting to victory lane.
Absolutely. Yeah, always a pleasure.
Indeed. And
last but not least, or maybe least,
on W227BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna Danville Southside, ask that smart speaker, open VTR in sports, and of course, the VTR in sports app.
UVA.
JerryRatcliffe.com founder and contributor, Jerry Ratcliffe. Hootie, I'll preface all this by saying it's probably going to be short-lived, the momentum from Virginia Tech this past Saturday when the Hokies, fought back to get it to 1 as the deficit a couple times. But every time Virginia got a big shot, particularly from Isaac McNeely, who came up big when Virginia needed him, assuming Virginia doesn't lose by like 35 tonight, that they're at least fighting against Duke. Is this another sign that Ron Sanchez, to his ever-loving credit...
Sorry, Ed. On me there. I couldn't hear the question.
Nope, you're good. Is this another sign, what we saw Saturday against Virginia Tech, another sign that Ron Sanchez, to his ever-loving credit, at least the Virginia Cavaliers are playing hard for him?
Yeah, they're playing very hard. And, if they gave a most improved award out to a team in the ACC right now, I think it would probably go to Virginia. But their offense has jumped dramatically in the past 3 weeks, I'd say. They're ranked really high over that time period. If you look at all the analytics out there, they're ranked among the top 15 in the country. But the defense is really what is going to make the difference. And down the home stretch here, if they can improve the defense and win some of these potential winnable games on the road, they have a chance for a decent finish. Tonight is obviously the biggest challenge of the season, taking on number 3 Duke, who is like taking on an NBA rookie team, I guess, because I think I saw the other day the top 7 players on Duke's roster are all ranked among the top 50 in possible draft choices. So that's a pretty tall assignment. I don't care who you are.
No doubt. I mean, it is. If Virginia can at least fight their way through this tonight, I think the spread is about 15. And, if you can hang around that number, it's probably a good thing for Virginia. Overall, though, for this Virginia Cavalier team, Ron Sanchez was emphatic that the win against Virginia Tech is a product of what has happened over time with this team continuing to fight and, frankly, taking the losses but learning from them. How accurate is that, even if that's hard to transfer from game to game and season to season?
Well, that's a good question, and I guess we won't know the answer until the season's over. But I mean, if you watch this team game by game, you do see increments of improvement, and several of their players have made some big jumps in their game over the past month. You look at Anthony Robinson and Andrew Rohde and Day Ames and Blake Buchanan. They're all different players than they were a month and a half ago. They are developing and they are a better team. It's just a matter of how good he can make them for this season. He may be getting as much out of them right now as he possibly can. And whether that's enough or not, we'll have to wait and see.
You'd find a lot of people, and we're probably in this boat as well, that I would say that, Ron Sanchez is getting as much out of this team as you could reasonably expect. There's just a cap on what you can actually put together from Virginia basketball this year. There is no cap on the insight. It is always fantastic at jerryratcliffe.com. Hootie, great to be speaking with you in the Fast Lane today, and we'll be looking at jerryratcliffe.com regardless of how the game tonight against Duke transpires.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate you having me on. We'll see you next week.
It's always our pleasure. Jerry Ratcliffe with us here to wrap it up and speaking with us as he gets ready to cover that game. When we come back Wednesday, weather permitting in the Fast Lane, we'll have more on this. Tomorrow, there's Virginia Tech baseball. That should get in with inclement weather not coming until early Wednesday morning.
Yeah, it doesn't come till Wednesday. I think afternoon, actually.
Dear God, please come in the afternoon so we can get a day of school in and I can at least be moderately productive during the course of the day before it gets real squirrely on Wednesday afternoon. Who knows, by the way, keep it locked. There may be a chance that we'll do a show Wednesday, but it may not be on YouTube, just given the inclement weather possibilities of that. We're going to kind of play this one by ear and then come back Thursday.
If you have to do it from home, Ed, which is, I'm assuming what you're talking about.
Yes.
We can do it on YouTube because all you need is I can just send you the StreamYard link and I know you have AirPods.
I do. And this may be the more, how do I say this? It might be a real entertaining version because you might get to hear and see kids in the background.
So I would bet it's like what we did when you joined a couple of Front Stretch podcasts before. So you would just do it like that. And this is Inside Baseball to wrap up the show.
Well,
and we'll have actual baseball tomorrow starting at 2:30.
We will. I thought you were going to talk about it in the morning warm-up, but I guess that's going to come a little bit later. I mean, there's bigger storylines to cover tomorrow than baseball.
Yes. Yeah, so I think I'll have Matt on soon in the next couple of days. Maybe even I'll reach out to the voice of Virginia Tech baseball.
The epic Evan Hughes, friend of ours.
3:30 tomorrow. I'm thinking Friday is 2:30.
Friday is 2:30, 3:30, whatever day. We're not having a show either tomorrow or Friday, but as long as the weather cooperates, because we do carry Virginia Tech baseball, which is awesome. We love Evan's work. He's fantastic at his job. Friend of ours, not just mine in the fast lane.
Ours.
Trey knew him before I knew him.
I've known him now for 10 years.
You know, he's
over 10 years.
He is a big part of the reason you're here today, because if he gave negative reviews about Trey Lyle, Trey would not be here today. But
who knew it?
Evan did a solid.
So I'm sorry. Maybe everyone needs to be upset with Evan. Who knows?
You know, maybe so. If you do not like the morning warm-up, just voice your displeasure to Fastlane Ed Lane, because ultimately I have to sign off on this. And yes, you can voice it to Evan Hughes, a friend of ours in the Fastlane. In the meantime, no Fastlane tomorrow. There is the morning warm-up tomorrow. We're back Wednesday in some form. VTR and Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTR in Sports.
Had steam